Welcome everybody to the next iteration of the Insurance Tech webinar. I'm so excited to have Jenny here with us and Dustin from SALT. Our topic today is the state of data intake in insurance. So I'm excited to have you guys talk about this. This is a really important topic and has been really revolutionized over the last few years for insurance agents. There wasn't a lot of choices in the beginning. I know when I started, data intake was a piece of paper. And then sometimes I had to wish my team good luck to read my handwriting after it was all written in there. I'm pretty sure we've all been there eventually or at some point. So Jenny here is the sales director at SALT. Dustin is one of the owners and original founders of SALT and also an insurance agent. Absolutely love that we get to have product experts who are working in the industry. So welcome you guys. Thank you for being here.
You.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mariah.
thank
We're
you.
happy to be here.
Awesome. So really excited to jump in. I'm going to kind of hand this over to you guys. I know we have a few different things you want to touch on. And we're going to kind of start with some of the common inefficiencies that you guys are seeing in like kind of traditional data collection, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, I think I'll take the lead there. Thanks, Mariah.
Awesome.
Um, and we'll talk a little bit about salt at the end. That won't be the main thing that we talk about today. But in case you're like, what is salt? Salt is a data intake platform. And when you combine a platform with what Mariah knows how to do very well, which is process, uh, miracles start happening. So we're going to really zoom into process today. I am an insurance agent, still am, have been one for 22 years. I'm an accounting major from school, so that my brain's wired around process. Um, and I've met with about 100, 150 agencies over this last year in one-on-ones and just listened to their process. So a little bit about where I'm going to start is what do we mean by data intake process? Why does it matter? And what I've seen kind of what I'm seeing across the country as to where data intake process is currently. Then I'm going to hand it over to Jenny to delve a little more into scenarios that she's seeing. She's going to be a little interactive with you guys. If you don't got mind using the chat, she'll probably do some polling. But what Jenny is she's a professional expert in sales. Like her credentials in the sales arena are. I spent 10 years in sales and they make me look like a beginner. So I really asked her to bring that sales expertise around why does data management, data collection, and how you handle prospect data, why is it so critical to successful sales? So that's something that I've asked her to really hone in on. And then we'll finish with like a just a hyperspeed 10-minute or less look at salt. So you guys have an idea what that is. Is that okay, Mariah, for the agenda today?
Sounds great.
Okay. So when I talk about data intake process, specifically today, I'm talking about personal lines, underwriting, data gathering, and then moving it into rating. That whole process of when you engage with the prospect and it's time to find out the square footage of their house or how many heaters they have and their dog breeds, and that whole interaction with them, the experience that if it's done at expert level versus beginner level and just kind of the implications. So I'm going to kind of start with why does it matter to have a data intake process and why does it matter that it's excellent and why does it matter that then you automate that or use software to power it. First of all, I want to say it affects job satisfaction. Your employees experience when you ask them to manually gather data, have two or three phone calls, four or five emails, and open 19 web browsers, and it takes them an hour by the time they get it through rating. And they look over here at another agency and it's taking them 3 minutes and it's beautiful. Like that, you repeat that process 100 times, and that that's not a great experience. So a high quality data intake process, especially for detail process nerds like myself, and then they're in an environment where it's chaos and it takes forever, that's not a great experience. Whether they leave or not, it's not the point. They're not happy. And people produce much better work, more creative work when things are done the right way. So security law. when you don't have a proper data intake process, you could be violating all kinds of security. We've learned painfully at Salt, not painfully that we didn't know, but painfully how expensive it is to build the software so that it complies. But you're dealing with, you know, PI and PII information that has all kinds of security laws, and they vary by state. And so having a thoughtful process and then training everyone to use that process can be an important part of your E&O and security law compliance. Uh, Next is customer experience. While they may not be your customer yet, they're your prospective customer. And not only do you want that experience to be delightful so that they close, you also want them to tell their friends, right? And I don't know if you've ever had just a wonderful onboarding experience. Maybe it's rare at a car dealership, and maybe buying the car was actually a good experience. You're so shocked that you go tell all your friends about it, right? Same thing with insurance. People are expecting a poor onboarding experience in insurance. Most people have not had a good experience. What if you delivered an amazing experience that is actually somewhat fun and efficient? And they're going to go talk to their friends. You start to really drive referrals through how you onboard and you intake data. And then finally, profitability. I know I've probably got some agency owners on the call, and you really care about return on investment and profitability. So when, if you're doing something that takes an hour and through a good process and technology, we can take that down to 3 minutes. And we repeat that 100 times in a month. You can do the math on the types of hours that are at stake, and that's paying someone to do that, right? So we've got labor costs, but we've also got what they could be doing, which is what in accounting we call opportunity cost. So that opportunity cost impact of what a good salesperson could be doing, but instead they're filling in 212 data fields into a form or a questionnaire, right? So
And
that
then
those
they're
are the
repeating
things that
that
are at
process
stake.
3 or 4 times,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. So I'm not going to try to pound that too hard, but I'm trying to set the stage of why should you care? Why does this matter? What's at stake? And so just keep that in mind: employee experience, customer experience, security and E&O, and revenue, as well as cost reduction. So those are the main things. And then I'm going to kind of pivot from that intro into the state of data intake as it is today and what we're seeing out there. I get
Can
asked a
I
lot, what
add
are other
something to
people
that,
doing?
Dustin?
Yeah, please do.
So keep in mind too, guys, this also is going to affect your relationship with your underwriters potentially, depending on what information you're gathering. If you constantly have holes in your underwriting, your field underwriting, and you're having to go back to the client, you're delaying the underwriting process for some of those policies that require more of a hands-on touch. You also could then have issues with your underwriting relationship. We all know that we want our underwriters to love us. I encourage people to send them Christmas baskets and fun things because you want to be at the top of their priority list. And this goes back to the same thing if you have gaps in your data. Not to mention also the underwriting quality. Just even if you don't have to deal with an underwriter, if your employees aren't asking the right questions and they're writing the policies wrong. Dustin mentioned E&O, but it's a very real concern. Think about your staff. They may vary in experience. Some of them have a lot and they know by heart what to ask. People who are new, they don't know. So if they forget to ask some of those questions, now you get an inspection flag. Now you've just added a lot more customer service work to your team as well. And potentially you're losing that policy or really destroying that relationship with that brand new client. So that underwriting piece, all the right questions and they can't forget, super huge as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, when Jonathan and I founded Salt, I had hair. So, as I went out to market to sell salt, we just thought, hey, if we build a product, this will be easy. But what I learned, and it shouldn't have surprised me, but if we don't have a process to place that technology into, then it's just chaos, and it's actually not helpful, right? Because now he's got one more tool, someone's using it. We don't really have a process for it. I think Mariah's created a very successful business with that thing right there, right? Like we've got to have good process, and so we're actually about to release in April the Salt Data Intake Quiz, and it goes through a whole scoring system to rank you beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And then it allows you to select an entire data intake process of how things can work properly in an agency around data intake. So I'm kind of borrowing from that right now. Unfortunately, it's not polished enough to release. I'll probably send some of the questions from our quiz in the chat later in the call. But when I talk about the state of data intake, I'm going to kind of go in layers of beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And start is, how many agencies have a data intake process to begin with? And how many of those are documented, right? And documented is important because that's how we train people and hold them accountable. And so that's kind of question two. How many agencies that do have a data intake process have actually trained their employees on it and have some kind of accountability to using that process every time? So what we're finding is more than half don't have a data intake process. Well, that's very problematic for any kind of solution to be applied if we don't have a process to begin with. So what we've started to learn at SALT is we're not process experts. That's what Mariah is, but starting to really just find out where agencies are at in that stage so that we don't overwhelm them or sell them a product that's not going to help them, right? So very important to have that process. That's going to be very powerful for E&O, very powerful for security, and it's going to probably shave 15 to 20% off your data intake time for rating. Technology is probably going to be a bigger chunk of savings, but the process to begin with, are we doing this on the phone? Are we going to be using a form? Are we going to what are the data that we're going to collect before we do a quote? What systems are we going to use? And then getting everyone to use the same process. I can't tell how many times I talk to agencies and there's 10 people and there's 10 different processes, right? Everybody's just doing it their own way and
Oh
they're
my gosh.
scribbling answers on stuff.
So true.
Yeah, and we got PII data all over the place. So we ultimately we're going to want that data centralized and structured. So that's the next big thing is that we have it all in the same format and we have it all in the same place. It's secure. But what you'll hear Jenny talk about is what if we want to quote them again next year and we didn't write them the first year? Where is that data? How do I move quickly with that or and follow up on that opportunity? Maybe state auto softened a little bit and I could win that account that I didn't win last year. So, the ability to efficiently collect that data and be able to go back after it and find it easily is part of what's in a process and why a process matters so much. Um, and then do you have a form? Most agencies do. Most agencies have a home and auto quote form or they call it a fact finder. But it's good if you do. Good job. You need some kind of thing to put the data into, right? Um, in most agencies, that would be like a Word doc or Excel or maybe a PDF. The challenge we see a lot is that that form becomes an ancient relic. It doesn't get updated. It doesn't have everything you need for this hard market. Then you get employees taking the form and modifying it for their use. So we end up with all kinds of different forms and how that's done. So that's what we see there with forms. Only 10% of agencies in the market, by the way, if you, it's a stat I have to be familiar with, there's 40,000 plus or minus independent agencies in the United States. So that's not counting farmers agents. If you have any farmers agents here, the captive market's a whole nother population, but I tend to think in the independent agent world mostly. So there's 40,000. So you have less than 4,000 agencies taking their forms and making them smart. So what does that mean? The smart forms are where probably 70% of your time saving opportunity is if you have a process to put that on. So what do I mean by smart? Does it educate the insured? A lot of people don't know what uninsured is. Does it advise the insured? Does it allow you to make recommendations on their coverage selections? Does it have integration so they don't have to look their VIN number up? Does it have, is it web-based? Is it mobile friendly? So those are what 90% of agencies don't have. Their form is very static, uh, probably needs to be emailed. The real fancy ones would have maybe a type form or a job form that they built, which is actually great job if you do. Um, and so that's kind of what we're seeing. Still, probably more than half don't have a process. Um, Still, even fewer are going to have accountability and training around the process. And most do have a form, but the consistency around using it the same way, the same form, and then only 10% of agencies that we see are using now just are using smart forms. But just so you know, 4 years ago, that number was about 1%. So we're seeing a big shift using modern intake tools in the marketplace. And I'll end with this before I hand it to Jenny or give ask Mariah to comment. Is the when you look at data intake, when I got in this business with Saul a few years ago, we had to spend a lot of time even explaining what we were. In the last year, data intake's become a category. It's become an insurance technology category. So in the same way you talk about, what's your CRM, what's your AMS, what's your rater, you now have what is your data intake solution. So it's shifting. No longer like I think we could get away with not having much in this space for a long time, but that is rapidly changing right now as far as people thinking about data intake, using that language, building process, and using modern tools for it. So um, any thoughts there, Mariah, for us segue to Jenny?
Yeah, I would just say in general, even if you guys don't have a form, if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't know, something like that, you really do because you are entering information into your AMS or you're putting it into a rater. That is a form. It is a version of a digital form that sends information from one place to another, right? It sends to the carrier, they send back a rate indication. But the problem is it's short. It's not a fully, underwritten picture. It also doesn't pre-fill. So there's some things that you probably already are benefiting from this type of concept, but it's very, very limited in your agency. Now, information that you might not put into your rater that you did ask, like, is there a trampoline or a dog bite history? Or you ask those questions or you need to ask those questions because without asking them can result in a lot of reactive customer service, right? Which bogs down your service team. And when it comes to growth, every single agency that I have ever talked to, and we have over 700 clients now, they all bottleneck because of customer service. And it's usually because the intake process is not thorough in the beginning. We always have to look at the process in the beginning to figure out where the problems are coming downstream. And Dustin, your point of processes and written and expectations, I can't echo that enough. We launched a new service in January specifically for this because we see the problems in agencies. One of our fractional COO agents is actually here in the webinar. I can see her name on the list. But this is exactly it. You get to the point where who is doing what? How do we train people? And that takes a lot of leadership. And 90% of the insurance agents I've talked to all were producers. They were all really good salespeople who became business owners. And there's no shame in this, you guys. If you're like, yeah, it's really hard for me to go to my producer and say, I want you to sell this way, because maybe you don't have a lot of confidence in, do you know better than them? Take their feedback, have discussions with your staff, develop that process collaboratively with your best people, and then make that system and process and hold people accountable to it. But any tech, digital forms, CRMs, AMS, raters, all of it requires leadership around implementation, training, and processes. And that's your role if you're watching this and you're an agency owner.
Great. Well, I'm excited to get Jenny talking about her sales experience, why data management matters, and I think she's going to want to interact with the agents some. So I'll turn it over to you, Jenny.
Thank you. Yeah, again, my name's Jen or Jenny. I'm the sales director here at Salt. Have a pretty substantial background in insurance technology. So how agents are interacting or digitizing their agency, whether that's from the actual agency standpoint, the carrier standpoint, the producer standpoint, all of that has really changed. I remember during COVID, a lot of our brokers that we were working with or agents were like, how do we talk to our customers without them coming into the agency? We're doing a lot by phone. We don't know how to interact with them outside of seeing them in person or talking to them on the phone. And consumers and insureds wanted an easier and, I guess, faster way to do business. So I want everyone to be honest for a second. How many of you actually got into the insurance agents or in the agency business to be a data entry specialist? Like, nobody here can say that they love data entry. Manual data entry is the pulling of time for many, many agents. But The real problem is that the inefficiencies inside of agencies are directly hurting sales. When you're spending so much time putting in data, then transferring it to a rater, then transferring it to your AMS, that is less time you're spending with your customer, understanding who they are, where do they live, what are their kids' names, what sports are they involved in. So every extra step, every manual process, every delay in quoting is lost revenue, bottom line. And customers will go elsewhere if agents are wasting time on admin instead of talking to them. Closing rates will suffer. As agency owners know, when you're thinking about the revenue and the premium at the agency, when you start to see it dip, it opens your eyes. So I want everyone to be challenged here to think about, what is our premium this year? What can we get it to if we eliminate manual processes instead of our agency? So when we think about manual data entry, let's break it down a little bit. So every keystroke, so every button you're clicking on your computer, everything you have to type into your computer is, again, time they're not on the phone. I talked to an agency this week who spent 4 hours on a home quote because they're getting the data manually. They didn't get everything they needed, so they're emailing back and forth with the customer, and the customer is probably not checking their email for their insurance quote while they're at work. So you're waiting and waiting and waiting for opportunities. And your competitor right down the street may have already closed that customer because they have a digitized process in place. So they're not just working faster, they're selling more. And so again, fewer errors, faster quotes, more deals, and really just automating this data intake. And a couple areas I want to talk about today before we talk about SALT a little bit deeper is outdated tools equal missed sales. I mean, that is also another bottom line. If your team is still using spreadsheets, sticky notes, outdated systems from the 2000s, they're slowing you down. And an agent who does spend half of their day fighting inefficient tools isn't spending that time following up. So we have to think upstream a little bit. Modern workflows, seamless integration between systems, and copying and pasting is not the thing that we're doing nowadays. And then to Dustin's point, if you lose that business this year and you want to requote that business next year, where are you going for that data? Are you searching in your email, your archived emails? Are you looking for the sticky note on your desk that you put a year ago? Probably not. So, that's something that we think about, a data hub. Where does that live if you have to go to it again? And I'll pivot a little bit, and I want to ask everyone on this call to feel free to put in the chat, but how many tabs on average do you have open in your browser to do a home and auto quote? I was on a call with an agent the other day who shared his screen with me, and he had 40 tabs, at least 40 open, to the point where you couldn't even see what's in the tab anymore, to just do home and auto quotes. And that's Zillow, auditor sites, carrier portals. You're jumping between these tabs just to put together one quote, which means every step is more time and a higher chance of losing that customer. And agencies just want their integrated data. Think about, as Dustin mentioned, smart forms. What if you could send a link to your customer? You're on the phone with them. Hey, customer, I could send you a link that takes 5 to 8 minutes to fill out. We'll already collect your VIN numbers. We'll know who the registered drivers are. We'll know the square footage of your home. All you have to do is verify this information, and how much time that could save. And how many of you have ever put a quote in your rater and it gets rejected because of one data entry error? Again, a dog's missing, a trampoline's missing, something, and then you're again having to go back to the customer. So we want to think about that back and forth a little bit. Yes, you want to talk to your customers, but the back and forth should be a relationship. It shouldn't be, do you have a trampoline? Does it have a net? Those different questions. And then when we think about, I'm going to transition this a little bit into marketing. When you have disconnected technology and you're not tracking leads, have you ever felt like agents are just entering the same data over and over into multiple areas but they're also not tracking where their leads are coming from or where they are in the funnel. So we think about your systems not talking to each other. We put all this information into a rater. It spits out, whatever you need, but then you miss something and you have to go back to the customer. But then also, where did that customer come from? Was it the mortgage broker down the street? Was it a current customer of yours? And that tracking is essentially leaving money on the table. Mariah, you probably know this. If you are asking agencies, well, how many referral sources do you have? There's like a silence for a second of like, oh, who do we work with?
Yeah,
Who are the mortgage brokers?
when we build out the CRM, one of the things that's unique to how we do it is the categories of sources of the marketing and then the sources themselves. We did a custom order just recently for a good size agency, independent, and we were working with their marketing director. And one of our questions to build out their workflows was, tell me about your marketing sources. Like what are those? We were building out for 5, and it took her 3 weeks to get it back to us on what their marketing sources were, and she was the head of their marketing department, but they hadn't defined them as to what activity is resulting in leads. For example, if you're part of a BNI, that is a marketing source. Are you tracking every opportunity that comes out of that BNI to find out, is this time well spent? Your website, all of these different pieces. That's how we build out our CRM workflows. Not only does it allow you to have a great communication that makes sense. This I'm connecting with you because this person at this mutual, business networking event asked me to contact you, really helps with your contact rate, but you get to track what's working and what's not. And when it comes to producers, like to your point, as far as getting all of this on one time, and Dustin mentioned employee satisfaction. When producers, anytime we have a little pushback about, oh, well, I have to ask, how did you find us? And then documenting that. My counter to that is always, would you rather have data to give your agency owner more information to say, these are the people we can close. This is the marketing I want you to do. This marketing has a 10% close ratio. This marketing has a 60% close ratio. Please do more of this marketing over here because I want to close at 60% and not 10%. Talk about employee satisfaction, but also producers, if you're watching this, I mean, come on, who doesn't want the best chance to close the business? We don't want to talk to 500 people and sell 50. We want to talk to 100 people and sell 50, right? Like that's the whole point. Very, very, very important. Big miss in a lot of agencies.
Absolutely. And I mean, would you run your agency without tracking revenue? I mean, that's
Some of them
essentially.
I mean, it happens. It happens. Accounting is hard.
Yeah.
Dustin went to school for it, right? It's hard.
It's very hard. And it's so we always ask the question, how are you tracking where your best leads are coming from? And some agencies I talk to are giving like gift cards out to some of their best referral sources or some type of stipend for those best leads coming in. And if you're not tracking them, you're throwing money out the window. And no one wants in this economy, no one is wanting to throw money out the window. So agencies using a referral tracking really, really focus their efforts on the channels that work, to your point, Mariah, driving that higher quality lead without the extra spending. I don't think there's one agency I've asked the question of where do your best leads come from? And they say word of mouth. That is always the way that agencies are growing, but what word of mouth, whose mouth is that coming from? So, more leads, obviously better conversion rates, higher revenue sounds like a win. I think that's a big one. But again, when we think about kind of the bottom line, every manual step, referral tracking, gathering data, putting it into your rater, is costing you sales. And again, when we think about the funnel of sales, the insured finds you somewhere, referral source, finds your agency in some way. Maybe they Google insurance agency in my area and they find your website. What does that customer experience look like? Because for me, as a millennial, if I find an agency that I want to work with and I maybe give them a call, actually, as a millennial, I'm probably not giving them a call. Let's be honest. I want to text you. I want to have a form that I can fill out quite easily because I'm sitting at my desk all day. That is the easiest customer experience. And I can guarantee if you're on the phone quoting an insured, the question of, hey, We can spend 30 minutes on the phone gathering data, or I can send you a link that takes 5 to 8 minutes for you to fill out. You don't have to gather a lot of your personal information. We will verify that through our public data pools. Which would you prefer? Most, I would say 90% of individuals are going to say, send me that link, text me that link, email me that link. I'll get started on it right away. And then you can have a quote to them by the end of that day. So
I would like to add to that a little bit. So I would also
yeah.
caution you guys in the way that you set that expectation to your staff. We have an agency we're working with right now where his staff picks up the phone and they get name and phone number and they say, I'm going to send you a link. And when it comes back, I will work on your quote. Have a nice day, and hang up the phone. And then they sit and wait for form responses. That is where that whole, like everything you said, Jenny, about giving them the choice and like setting expectations around the time that the prospect has to spend on the phone, great. But if it's not done well, it can be abused. This particular agent, all of his quote rates, closing rates, production rates have dropped dramatically because the team is also using it as a crutch and missing the opportunity to actually speak with the prospect and get to know them. So for example, if you say, do you have a dog? And they say, yes, I have a pit bull. Has the pit bull ever bitten anybody? No, that's a rating piece of information. But then some people want to gush about their dogs, right? Oh, she's the cutest little pit bull. I just got her and she's so cute and she licks my face and she loves her chew toys and she sleeps in my bed, because that's how you build relationships with people. You get to know them, right? So those underwriting questions, while sometimes, it makes perfect sense to say, you might hear a screaming baby in the back of the phone call. I mean, think about it. We talk to people who are working. I've talked to guys that are on the construction crew and they're like, my wife said I have to get an insurance quote. And you can hear the jackhammers in the back or the crying baby. And that is a perfect time to say, you know what? It sounds like you've got a lot going on. I can send you this quote link. Is that okay? I'll follow up with you tomorrow. But don't send them. I just want to caution you guys, because this can go south. We're watching it happen now. We're retraining, working on trying to retrain this staff. You need to have a discussion, build a relationship, stand out, then offer that, because then they do remember you fondly. And it isn't just a form experience, because there is something to be said about local agents and the relationship that you have, so it doesn't become too transactional. Millennials like you and I, we like transactional, don't get me wrong. But if we like you, that is even better. So just be careful with that, agency owners. Make sure you have good leadership around that and watch that talk time. They should be still spending a couple minutes getting to know that person, asking important questions, and then sending out that link.
Yeah.
And it really gets back to what you're saying, is what we started with. Do you have a process? Do you have a
Yes.
way that you do phone? And do you have a way that you introduce your data intake in that conversation? And then did you train on it? And then did you hold accountable, right?
Yeah, to
So
measure
if
and
we
hold
skip any
accountable.
of those steps, the tool's not going to be the solution.
100%.
yeah. And in addition to that, to your point, Mariah, it's all about the follow-up and how you're engaging with, yes, you could send links all day long, but if you get a form submission and you don't call them for 3 days, they're probably going to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about when you are setting up forms at the agency level, how are your producers who sent the link being notified that that form has been completed? Are they sending reminders to those who start the form and may fall off because they're in the pickup line picking up their kiddos and they start the form and then the kid gets in the car and they have to drive off? So, it's these little details that can seem overwhelming, but if you set it up right the first time and have that entire customer journey inside of your softwares or inside of your systems, it can really be a game changer for you. I have an agent who we recently onboarded to Salt, and he said there's a feature that we kind of take for granted, and it's the alert of a form being submitted. He's like, I get a text message as soon as that form is completed, and I can call that insured right when they submit it to say, hey, I got your form. Thank you so much for your business. I will be able to get back to you in X amount of time. That is customer service. And again, I've heard of agencies who say, well, we don't know where our forms go after they're filled out, or, everyone's not being notified. So I think that's a really important piece too of the sales funnel, is making sure that when they complete the steps, that you're able to follow up on them pretty quickly. And I'll kind of wrap it up with just saying, I think more and more agencies are automating. They're thinking about integrating. We think about all these buzzwords like modernizing, digitizing, efficiency, but the thing that comes to mind is the most cliche sentence on the face of the planet is working smarter, not harder. If you take a day and just time yourself, put a little timer on your phone next to your desk, and the next time you start a quote, time yourself and see how long that takes. Figure out where in the process it took the longest, and then start to think about what can we do to cut down on this. And change management is hard. We get that. It's very hard to get everybody on board, but pick the tools that your team has feedback in. Invite your teams to calls for demos or new software technology. Figuring out where you are in that process and getting your team bought in. I'll end it with saying one of our best customers said, there was one guy inside of his agency who he knew was not going to get on this platform. He knew that it was going to be an uphill battle. And he said, try it for 30 days. Just every quote you send out, every piece of information you gather, have it live in Salt. And over that time, he started seeing his closing ratio increase. He started seeing the commissions come in a little bit more. He started seeing the customer satisfaction increase. And so it could be just these small changes in your agency, especially with some of those who are doing it the old way, so to speak, could really be a huge benefit to the agency. So just again, automating and really, really thinking about thriving inside of the agency versus shutting the agency door after 5 and having to do a bunch of admin work. I think that's probably the most important piece there. So I would love to hear in the comments from agencies on, too, like what is the hardest part of your data intake process? Is it gathering the data from the insured? Is it putting it into your systems? I would love to hear that feedback. So, and anyone can reach out to me with that feedback too.
Yeah, you guys that are in the call here, go ahead and open up the chat and type that in, right? So if you think about when you pick up the phone and you have a prospect, and then between that phone call and then submission of a quote, what is taking the most time? What is the most painstaking part of that? Give us some of your pain points in the chat, and we'll talk about those a little bit more. I will say also when it comes to, you mentioned change management and employees, and this goes back to, well, I guess the first part of the year, we've been doing automation now for 6 years and, have worked with 700 agencies. We hit 700 yesterday. We're so excited. And those are captive and independents and everything in between, you guys. 1 employee, no employees, 30 employees, everything. And I can tell you guys, it is consistent that this process, operation, training, accountability, it exists across every agency, every state, every dynamic. It's just a small business problem. It really is. Because you could also walk into an auto body shop and you'd see the same thing, right? You'd see the same thing. So it's small business. It's hard. We're focused on what drives revenue and not always the operations. But if your goal is to scale, if you do want to grow your business and scale, this is a must. You will not hit your goal without processes, procedures, accountability, and great systems. And in the insurance space, it has become increasingly digitized, right? There's people out there who are like, oh, the future of the insurance agent, I don't know. Like those discussions are happening in our industry. So if you want to stay in this very old-fashioned way of doing business and your new target client is me and Jenny, because we're millennials, right? I'm 37. I'm your target client. I got a couple kids, a house, a car, a business. Like who doesn't want that customer, right? I need a bunch of life insurance. It's got to be digital. We are the computer age kids that grew up with all this stuff. And if you ask me to email you back and forth 15 times with questions, I'm going to lose interest, you guys. We're the scrollers. We're the ones that made Instagram popular and TikTok. There's the TikTok generation too. They're a little after us, but we have short attention spans. It used to be YouTube videos. Now it's reels. They're 3 or 4 minutes long. You got to hold their attention. And if you haven't absorbed this and you're like, I'm going to dig my heels in and I'm going to do it the old way. It's your business. That's the beautiful part about small business. Do what you want. But I would pick a retirement date because you're probably going to start really having struggles if you don't adapt to what your customers are looking for and your staff, right? Your staff are probably also our age and they're going to have a really hard time working in a very antiquated environment.
You don't hold any punches, Mariah. I like it.
I don't. I didn't say any bad words, so this is a good webinar because I usually throw a
Let's
couple
go
out
ahead and
there.
set your retirement date. Okay.
Just be like, okay, 10 years, I'm done. Because in 10 years, I mean, if you're trying to write
Yeah.
stuff on paper, people are gonna laugh at you.
No, you're not wrong. I mean, you said it needs to be digital, and I'd add it needs to be mobile.
That
People can't
too.
do it on their
Yes.
phone on the fly. Oof. Well,
Yeah.
Mariah, I posted a very rudimentary quiz in the chat, but that is just to us. I don't think I have the right to send it to everyone. So if you wanted to repaste
Oh,
that
yep, let me do
into the
it.
chat to
Sorry.
everyone. We're going to release a very fancy web-based quiz soon. It's not ready, but I just gave y'all the link to the Google Doc with the questions. So if you just wanted to kind of, test yourself and take our little agency quiz just to see kind of where you're at, that link will give you just the questions in the Google Doc.
Perfect. It's in there in the chat, guys,
Um,
for everybody that's here.
yeah, thank you. And Mariah, I usually take 15 to 20 minutes for a demo, so I'm going to do it 8 minutes, just to give a look at salt. Would that be all right?
Yes, let's do it. Let's dive right in.
Okay. And by the way, Mariah can distribute it, but we have a full demo with Mariah on Accelerate Automation's YouTube channel. So while I'm talking, she might want to put that down. So if you wanted a more thorough look at salt, that does exist. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So remember salt. Obviously, we are presenting salt as the technology solution. While we don't create your process for you, it does make the process building for data intake speed up a lot, right? Because it's a platform. It solves forms, it solves centralization, structured data, security, mobile friendly app experience for your insured. So it solves a lot of the pieces of the process, but you still need to have one. And that's something we're starting to build some resources around. So this is our SALT dashboard. This is where all your submissions come in. Jenny noted that when you get a new submission, you get alerted. You control those alerts, email, text, and it can be to multiple people. It'll also alert you, however you want to be alerted when they start the form. So when they kick off the form, and we do have some agents that will look at their progress and call them very quickly if need be. Um, all the submissions live here, and you can sort through your submissions in a myriad of ways, including referral sources. This is what a submission in the SALT platform looks like. So it is very robust. This is an overview, but this is going to tell you who it's assigned to in your agency. It's going to tell you where it came from. And you can set up as many unique links. And in those links is the source code for where that lead came from. So in seconds, you can create a link to your form specifically for your favorite mortgage broker. Or you could create a form for your mortgage broker and have links for each of their employees so you know exactly who at that mortgage broker sent you that opportunity. And guess what? All that can be flow right into Agency Zoom with our native integration with Agency Zoom. So Salt will collect it, tell you where it came from, and kick it off to your CRM for you. So these are some of the things about a submission. Everything's time stamped. We know where it came from. We also have robust public data reports on property, on auto. If we collected any documents like policy copies or deck pages, they're going to be here. We just released a new feature in Salt. It's live and it's available. It's finished the public private beta time period, and that's called our deck page solution. So I'm going to show you how that works real quick. But right here, after you get the submission in, you may want to say, "Hey, Mariah, it would be great if I could do an analysis of your coverage. I want to make sure that we're even equal or even better on the coverages. And so I'm going to ask you for your deck pages and we're also going to make sure we didn't miss any important data. And so then you can hit the request button. You could grab that link, copy that link, and then I already have it up over here. And they're going to have a very simple ability to give you their deck pages. And you might say, what are you talking about? So they would just select that it's bundled with one carrier or two carriers. And then they're going to be able to, it's going to tell them, hey, we're not doing anything weird with this information. You're giving consent. Everything's private. All that's taken care of here. And then they're simply going to be able to select their carrier from a list. we actually have a dummy one that I'm going to use here so you can see the experience. But let's see. Oh, I guess I timed out.
If you guys don't have a password keeper, this is a good promo for 1Password. It's the one I use too. It works great. I don't know how many times I had made Excel lists in my agency of logins for different platforms to like pull county records, and my staff was like, this password's wrong, or I tried and it's, there's a typo. Oh my gosh, so much time wasted. Password keeper is huge, huge benefit.
Critical. Yeah. I don't know any of my passwords anymore. They're all encrypted and measure one determines. Pulls them right in. Um, so I just got the deck pages just then. So I was able to enter my encrypted credentials and it pulled all the deck pages from my carrier. All I'd have to do here as an agent is refresh my screen.
Oh, is that me? Did I freeze?
Financial institutions. So the copies of the policies are there, but we also build a full data report so that you're basically it's like a SALT deck page so that the structure of the deck page is the same for every carrier. And we fill that whole report out for you. And it's right here by line of coverage, premiums here, and the structure of the data, all the mortgagees, et cetera, all the details about the policy. So it's kind of like a customized deck page for your use, easy to grab a few data points and copy paste them into another field if you need to. So that's just, there's three ways to intake data that I've been able to think of. Someone smarter than me might think of a fourth, but there's policy data, there's public domain data, and there's insured data, the stuff that's in your head, like dog breed, probably not going to find anywhere other than talking to the insured, right? And so Salt's built as a platform to seamlessly bring in that data from all three sources, store it, sort it, and then migrate it to the systems that you need to go to. Maybe that's Agency Zoom, maybe it's PO Rater, maybe it's both. Salt can handle that for you in one click. So that's what we're trying to be is a premier data intake platform for personal lines. Um, and then I'll show you quickly.
And one of these days, commercial lines.
One of these days, commercial lines. Although we just spent 6 months arguing about our product roadmap, and what won was renewals. So where we'll be working very hard over the next couple of years is to deliver this same experience in the renewal process where you need to maybe clean the data or re-verify some data in a hard market, or maybe you want to ask your customer 7 survey questions about your experience while you verify their roof. That'll be what we're really dreaming up in Salt and how to intake that from your existing AMS as well. So that's where you see a lot of work. But yes, we'd love to be for commercial as well. So let's say you are on the phone, and Jenny talked a lot about being able to do this. You can send them a link, but a lot of times maybe you are talking to a baby boomer or a Gen Xer like me, and you just can realize real quick that probably should just be stay on the phone. We got them on the phone, no problem. We've built that into Salt as well, and I call it live intake. I think some of us call it agency generated form. And I'm not going to go through it all, but you would be able to be in a live conversation. Of course, you're going to get some basic information from them, phone number, so we can set up the record. And then it's going to drop you into our live intake platform, which is going to give you just a really clean vertical scroll so that you can be tabbing through the questions. You don't know why they called, right? So now you can just add lines. So here it's a home. So I hit the home button. All my home questions are going to drop in. We have public data integrations. So you can have I have to put my address in, but I'd be able to click this button and it would pull in all the public data on your home live, real time. So we're just verifying square footage and things instead of saying, what is your square footage? So all that's built into our phone intake. So when you use Salt, you don't have to be committed to the consumer completing the data. If you want to do it live on the phone, or we see agencies all the time with people coming in, and they're sitting across the desk. So we have this platform built for that. It's actually the area that we're spending the most work on right now. So coming very soon, you're already able to modify the intake such that you can hide questions that aren't relevant to you. But pretty soon you'll be able to take notes right in here, be able to scribble in, add notes that you find out. So we're going to make this much more dynamic. And where we started is the consumer form experience. So I'm going to flip over to that. whether they do a live intake on the phone or they do it on the consumer, it's going to show up in Salt in the same exact structure. So that's what's nice, to have a centralized, structured way of the data, no matter how it came in. We'll tag it differently, that your agent put it in versus a consumer for E&O purposes, but it'll have the exact same structure once it's taken in.
On this
Does that make
internal
sense?
piece, Dustin, I just want to also have you guys be thinking about different types of people in your agency. So if you use a virtual assistant answering service, something like that, we see a lot of agencies use that. They don't have to have insurance training, right, to ask these questions. They really don't. You can teach them through the form, and you can say, hey, virtual assistant, I want you to ask these questions, and then let them know that our team will reach back out. It's systemized, it's organized. I know agencies that have their virtual assistants do the intake, and then they are going to all the county websites, they're gathering all the information, they're manually doing all of this work while before they hand it off to the producer. And think about the amount of time that you're going to save if you're hiring a virtual assistant, or if maybe you just have a receptionist who's answering the phone. Those are usually lower cost, lower skill level employees. That's kind of the whole point. But you can make them that much more valuable in your business, and equip them with tools that are very, very easy to follow. They're not going to forget. The data goes exactly where your producer needs it to be, so that they don't have to retype it. So think, beyond just your producer, who maybe they could ask these questions in their sleep. Maybe you've had the same producer for 20 years. I've talked to people like that. Great. And maybe you're like, how is this going to help me? But what if that producer that has 20 years of experience could just quote and sell and not intake, because you could hire somebody for half the cost, or maybe even a quarter, as an introductory person, and you don't have to spend the time retraining them. You can just sit them down in front of this and have them answer these questions. And now that really experienced producer can sell more insurance. So be thinking about how this applies to the day-to-day of your business, and who could use this. Can also help you train new staff.
No, that's great. That's great. That first page y'all saw me go through is that's a squeeze page. Salt allows you to build as many squeeze pages as you want. So think about different branches, or think about a key referral source that you want to co-message with. You can set all that up, and have a unique link for each of those. And what Mariah said is a great point. And when agents use a VA or an outsourced answering solution, they'll use the consumer form for that person, because all this language up here is customizable, and you basically create scripts for non-insurance experts to take someone through the intake using our consumer form. So
That was one of the
great
questions
point.
in our chat right now. Nikki asked if we can create custom questions. So the answer to that is yes, Dustin.
So yeah, that's a great point. So our questions are customizable, meaning we have a huge library of questions. Within each questions that we have, you can turn them on and off. You can make them required or not, and you can make recommendations. So those questions are customizable. And that's a different question, which is what you asked, is can I just create any question I want? Well, first we'd say, make sure you that we don't have it. It's very exhaustive. But coming in Q2, the two things coming in Q2 is lots more dynamics in our live intake. And then we're finally going to give custom questions to our agents. So you
So
will be able to
excited.
create as much chaos as you want in this system. But yes, that's actually the next project they're working on, and it won't take them long. It's just more of, we had to do a lot of thinking about where that data goes with Zapier, with integrations and third parties, and a lot of times you won't be able to like take that data into a rater, but you'd at least be able to ask it and get it into your system. So
Love it.
it's gonna go through these. You see that red asterisk there, as required. You guys get to control that, what's required and what's not. So, and I'm not going to go through our whole form today, because we don't have time, but Google Address Finder and all that stuff's built into the form. And it's this address that we need to kick off our public data integrations, right? So yeah, see, it's not going to let me. I got to say how long I've been there. If it's less than 3 years, for example, it's going to ask for that previous address. So it is a very smart logic tree based form. Here, I entered my information, but I didn't enter my wife. It found her as a registered driver to that address. So and all I got to do is check her name and answer a couple questions on her. You can add drivers the old-fashioned way. And then I wanted to show this off too. So, it found all my vehicles. It's pulled all their VIN numbers and put them into the form for you and a report. But they can also toggle on, I have no idea what this is. So public data is not always right, right? It's probably about a 20% error rate. So now they've been able to say, no, I don't have that car. So they're not going to check that. And so they've been able to verify and correct public data. Lots of education in the forums about coverages. All this type of stuff is customizable. So we do provide language, but you can change it. Here's the agent suggested. We used to say agent recommended, but we had some agents get a little uncomfortable with that from an E-Gnosis. So that's been changed to suggested. And so you can pre-fill everything with your suggestions, but you don't have to have these as well. And then they would just get a drop-down menu. So I'm going to stop there because I just wanted to give y'all a feel. The property is very similar in that regard. I don't mind answering questions for it, but you know, got all the ride sharing questions, but then it'll seamlessly flip over to property just like that. So, because it already has the data of the contact. We also do rentals, rent houses, tenant properties, all of that. And so, all built into the form based on the answer to the question. So, yeah, I'll end on this screen. It populated my house, found my bedrooms, found the square footage, family yearbook built. So, all that's from our public data integration. So,
I also want
but
to say
I
I
know we're
love
out
this.
of time, so I just wanted to give a feel
Yeah.
for it.
I love this card format also, you guys. I've been using forms for a long time, using Jotform, Gravity Forms, other form solutions, Salt. And when you have a very long form that runs on one page, you will lose people. The drop-off rate is so high. So keep in mind, there's a lot of psychology that goes into a lot of the stuff that these guys are doing. And we know that that card format keeps people engaged and thinking one thing at a time moving forward. They have a much higher success rate. So I've had agents ask me, well, I could just build a job form that does that. But it's not going to do the same thing, you guys. You're not going to have all of this testing behind it. It's not going to pull in public data. You can't pull deck pages. It is not going to be as seamless. There are cheaper versions of everything, right? There's always the do-it-yourself version, and then there's the professional version. So my challenge to you guys would be think about what do you want your customers to think of you? Does this look very done DIY, right? Do you want to walk into the house or the insurance agency and think, oh, this is very DIY, or this is extremely professional and well put together? Just yesterday on our page, I was posting and asking agents about what is the first impression that customers or prospects get of your agency? Where does it start? The answers varied, you guys. There were so many answers in the comments of our group about where the first impression starts. And the answer is that all of those were correct. The first impression is wherever they start with your business. It could be word of mouth, like Dustin mentioned earlier. It could be your website, your intake process, your data. All of this really, really matters. So please look for the right solutions that are growing, that are adding features, that are going to be around, that have integrations, are going to make your lives easier. When you start trying to DIY it yourself, you are going to have a lot of the same problems, just in a different place. So the question on here, so notes you said are coming. So excited for that. Deck page collection. We know another company that does that, right? I'm so excited that Salt does that now. That's so cool. Do you guys have any questions before we wrap up here? I'm looking at the chat right now. I think that you guys did an amazing job. So we don't have a ton of questions. I think you answered everybody's burning questions, but we'll give attendees here a moment to type in their last questions. And then Dustin and Jenny, anything you would like to add as we wrap up?
No, I'll say quickly that I came to Salt pretty recently, and Dustin knows did a pretty in-depth interview process to make sure and ask the questions, how is this helping agents? I've worked with agents for years, but how is this actually moving the needle for agents? And the time savings itself is incredible. I mean, if you think about just the time savings from a sales perspective and how much more time you can spend with your customers. So yeah, I would be happy to show anybody the full experience, and really excited to hear more about how agencies are spending their time.
Yeah, we have
Dustin,
a
final thoughts?
special
Oh,
arrangement with Accelerated. So there is a unique discount that just comes with Accelerated Automation customers. So make sure I put our website in the chat. So if you do want to learn more about Salt, also just make sure we know that you came from Accelerated so that you get that discount.
yeah, saltinsure.com is where you want to go if you guys would like to connect with them. And of course, if you're like, oh, I can't remember, obviously you can reach out to Accelerate Automation as well. We will also connect you. Salt is on our partner page on our website also. And, we would love to help you connect with them. Thank you guys so much for being here to talk about the importance of data and the intake process, and to really challenge agency owners to think about this as an entire process and the importance and how it bleeds into all other areas of their business. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
We're
Mariah.
thankful for the partnership, Mariah, and it was an honor to be here today.
Bye, guys. Thanks for being here.